YouTube says it has had enough of vaccine misinformation on its site.
And false stories from phony sites to run circles around major news outlets.
Many people don't know the difference between something real and something created to deceive them.
Open your eyes.
If you've ever had this feeling that something was terribly wrong with the world that we live in, but you couldn't figure out just what it was, then you've come to the right place. Secret societies, mystery religions, and the Illuminati have been controlling our reality since the beginning of time. But not anymore, because there is an awakening happening, and you are about to become a part of it. Wake up, because this is a call for an uprising.
This is a call for an uprising. Welcome to today's show. I wanted to do a video on Joe Rogan because a subscriber on the website, Nicole, who shares a lot of great information along with all of you on the website, shared this clip from the Joe Rogan experience. And it's important to play this clip and to take into context of what they're trying to do. All of these agents who are in place, like Joe Rogan, like Russell Brand, this alt-right media, and Joe Rogan doesn't necessarily qualify as being a part of the alt-right, but we all know that he showcases the alt-right on his show. He brings up conspiracy theories. He's linked to Alex Jones. He's linked to Elon Musk. He is one of them. You don't interview the president of the United States, Donald Trump, unless you are one of them. You don't get near any of these people. And what they're beginning to do is they're beginning to get their audience into accepting universal basic income. And they're doing it in a subtle manner where they talk about frustrations with being able to have enough income in their savings account, because of course regular people are struggling to save money compared to the people like Joe Rogan who make millions of dollars a day or at least a week. People are struggling to make money because the government is deliberately sabotaging the economy. They're making it so that it's almost impossible to save anything because everything at the grocery store is more money. You're buying food, but you're actually getting less food in every single package that you purchase. And we just see the effects of what this is doing to people's day-to-day lives. They're penny pinching everywhere they can and forcing people to have to go into their savings account in order to be able to survive. So Joe Rogan plays into this while convincing his audience that with what is coming with AI, that universal basic income is going to be the only solution. When in reality, all of these people who have a huge platform, who are allowed to have a huge platform, should be talking about human rights. And they should be talking about how all of us as human beings should be banding together. And we should be stopping the movement known as artificial intelligence. We shouldn't be allowing it to exist. The small group of people and our own government who is funding this should be stopped. And if people out there can't stop it, then they need to learn how they can use and create electromagnetic pulses to short circuit these things in the future, because these things aren't only going to take our jobs. These things are going to be used with the military. These things are going to be used with the police force. These things are going to be used to show up at your front door. And Joe Rogan and these agents want you to just accept the chaos going on in the world, and how the same people like Bill Gates talk to us like we're children and say, look, AI is going to come and steal your job. You're not going to have a job. You're not going to be able to survive. Instead of telling these people, excuse me, you're going to tell us that we can't have jobs and we can't survive because you're building out some artificial intelligence center, these database centers using demonic fallen angel technology? I don't think so. Really, people should be banding together and blowing up AI in general. And these people on large platforms should be telling their audience that we need to pull back on technology before we give the government too much control over our lives with things like universal basic income, digital currencies, and of course, digital identification. So Joe Rogan has the #1 podcast in America. He gets millions of downloads per episode. He's the most known podcaster out there. They try to make it seem like he's linked to the alt-right, that he's a bit edgy because he'll talk about Project Bluebeam. He'll talk about a lot of the topics that someone like me talks about. But here's the difference. We don't get platforms to talk about these things and talk about real resolutions to how to stop these things from moving forward. These people are given those platforms because they're giving you the solution. The solution is accept it. The solution is, hey, universal basic income isn't so bad. That's why there's articles like this out there. A German experiment gave people a basic monthly income. The effect on their work ethic is surprising. So people who have universal basic income are actually working harder, huh? Tell me how that possibly works, right? Well, you're going to work even harder when you have a universal basic income as opposed to when you have a job and you're supposed to work hard to earn the money that you're being paid, right? Talk about a clown world that we're living in. Of course, that's propaganda produced by CNN. But again, people like Bill Gates, within 10 years, AI will replace many doctors and teachers. Human beings won't be needed for most things. How we allow them to tell us, this is the same thing as saying, hey, in 10 years, I'm going to take your home, I'm going to take your kids, I'm going to kill you and take all your income away. And we let them say things like that. We let them out in the open on stages with microphones. They're allowed to be platformed. They're allowed to be listened to. And all the alt-right media does is gatekeep for them because none of them say, hey, you know what? Who are these MFs that are allowed to say these things that are going to take our jobs, that are going to force us into some type of universal basic income where we have a little allowance from Big Brother, but they're also going to control and modify our behavior. So in order to have your universal basic income, of course, you're going to be tracked and monitored online. And if you say something they don't agree with or you complain about universal basic income, guess what? Your account will be frozen and you won't have any food for the week. That's how this whole world is going to work. And agents like Joe Rogan are preparing their audience for it. They trust in these people because they tickle their ears with some conspiracy topics, and they come in with the solution for all these problems by saying that we need to accept them. And here's Joe Rogan holding up the 666 hand sign. He's been an agent since the day he stepped foot in Hollywood. He was on the television show News Radio, a show surrounded by controversy, which had the comedian Phil Hartman on there, who had a very bizarre, mysterious death that his wife supposedly shot him in the head. There's a lot of bizarre circumstances surrounding that. And of course, there's a direct connection to Joe Rogan, but I'm not saying that there's any real connection there. But you could research it yourself and see if there's just a lot of weird coincidences revolving around the rise of Joe Rogan and the demise of Phil Hartman. We've seen him hold up the 666 sign again many times. Joe Rogan, a member of the Black Eye Club. You could say, well, Joe Rogan is a black guy because he's into UFC, he's into mixed martial arts, he fights and does this stuff all the time. Well, most of the time, these clowns, when they join the Black Eye Club, instead of taking a few days off from being on camera, or at least just saying, hey, I don't want to have pictures taken of me, they love to pose and show everybody their black eye. But I'm sure that's a coincidence as well. Also a coincidence that Joe Rogan has a very infamous photo with Stanton LaVey, who was the grandson of Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, and is even throwing up devil horns and on his shirt, flat out, you could see the 666 on his shirt, right? But he's not an agent, right? Now, a lot of people believe that the Shock Jocks card from the Illuminati card game, which of course I've done many videos on, you're all familiar with it. We have the Twin Towers explosion, the Pentagon. There's so much predictive programming in those Illuminati cards. A lot of people believe that the Shock Jock card is actually Joe Rogan. Now, when we hear the word Shock Jock, we all think of Howard Stern. That's what we were told in the 90s. But if you think about it now, in today's world, Howard Stern is not a shock jock. Howard Stern does cookie cutter interviews with celebrities. They consider Joe Rogan a shock jock. All the controversy that constantly surrounds Joe Rogan, he's considered a modern day shock jock. And his best buddy was also considered the agent in place, right? Alex Jones, who is always a guest on his show, always gets promoted on his show, who's always on the show telling everyone how he was right about this, right about that. Never really sheds light on Israel or 9/11. Constantly talks about being victimized, kind of like the small hats like to do. Alex Jones always lets us know that they're trying to take all of his money, yet he still somehow, after we were told he lost trillions of dollars to Sandy Hook victims, still is on the air, still living in a mansion. And just like all these people who claim to be deplatformed, they're still fully platformed. So Rogan's show, and I'll play the clip for you now, serves as it's really like, it's a central place for all these alt-right media folks to show up and get millions of views and then get more subscribers to their channel, right? He's got agents like Jordan Peterson on, who's even on there holding up the 666 sign. Somehow people fall for the deception of this Jordan Peterson guy. Ben Shapiro is often a guest. Other people from the Daily Wire go on Joe Rogan's show. Tucker Carlson's on there. And obviously Rogan, very close with Donald Trump. He's had Russell Brand on the show, and we all know he constantly has Elon Musk on the show. And on top of that, talks about how Elon Musk is one of the smartest people alive. Can you see where we're headed towards with technocracy and how a lot of these clowns like Joe Rogan are going to fully get their audience on board with moving towards a technocratic government? Because that's what we're going to see in the next couple of years. But here's the clip of Joe Rogan talking about universal basic income and making a case for why it might actually be a good thing for people.
And so there's a lot of people that feel completely disenfranchised by the system that's currently in place now that I think is going to be upended by AI. So there is an opportunity for them to do something completely different. And the positive aspect of universal basic income is that, first of all, I think we could both agree that if an enormous amount of jobs just go away, that probably is the only way to sustain society. You can't just have people go poor and go hungry when we have unfathomable wealth that's being created by these same systems, right? So universal basic income, on one hand, has a lot of hope because there is this potential that you now no longer... So we're locked into this situation where you think that you're working and you have to work because you have to take care of food and you have to take care of shelter. And this is what most people are doing with... most people in this country right now are working check to check. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and they're essentially getting by. And any catastrophe, medical or otherwise, will eliminate all savings instantaneously, and they're doomed. And so what they're doing is just working, giving most of their life just to sustain whatever state they're in currently. And that's very frustrating for people because they don't think they ever get ahead, and they don't think they have any potential to get ahead. So if something comes along that takes care of that aspect of life, so if universal basic income can provide you with food and shelter, now you no longer have to think about food, you no longer have to think about shelter. Now you have to find meaning.
So of course these clowns, instead of telling you to fight AI, to march against, no, to do more than that. There's so many of us, and we shouldn't be sitting here saying, well, they keep telling us AI is coming, AI is coming. We shouldn't be sitting here and saying, oh, it should be allowed to come, when they're telling us, well, it's coming and it's going to take your job. It's coming and it's going to change the way the world works. It's coming and you have to do this and do that. We should all be saying, well, who says it's coming? Why is it here? Why is the government passing laws to establish it as something that's going to be permanently in place without our permission as citizens? Because people are too dumbed down and distracted to even pay attention to it. They're just being told that it's coming and it's coming for them. And people like Joe Rogan should be saying, hey, why don't we rise up against it? AI is the greatest threat to humanity. You hear these guys talking about AI governance and what Donald Trump is building out? Of course not. Of course you don't. But they will tickle your ears and talk about things like Project Bluebeam and other government conspiracies, which are true. And that's how they get people sucked in, because they give you little bits of truth. And of course, his best buddy, like I mentioned, Elon Musk, is all about that universal basic income. And this is the same guy who's planning on creating a third party, the new party, which we all know is the Technocrat Party, to run against the Republican and Democratic candidates come the next election, right? And that's going to be a party of universal basic income, right? So they're going to need people like Joe Rogan to start promoting it and pushing it out. And for anybody out there who hasn't seen it, if you want more proof, or if you don't believe enough that Joe Rogan's an agent, which you should believe just based on the fact that they wouldn't allow somebody to have an audience like that. They wouldn't have Joe Rogan interviewing Donald Trump and all these alt-right media guys. Because all it does when he interviews the alt-right media guys is it gets those alt-right media guys bigger followings. And that's how they've built out the controlled alt-right media, through Joe Rogan's platform. But this is a clip from the show News Radio in 1995. And he's talking about Freemasonry. You would only be allowed to do this clip on national television. This was on NBC. This was a big show. I believe it was on, I'm not positive, but I think it was on right before Seinfeld was on. I mean, this was a show that got a lot of eyeballs on it back then, when sitcoms were getting millions and millions of views every week. You wouldn't be allowed to play this role on television talking about Freemasonry and Tubal Cain unless you were part of the club, okay? They wouldn't pick some guy off the street. You wouldn't be in Hollywood on a national sitcom anyway unless you were one of them. But they certainly wouldn't let this stuff be revealed on the show unless it's being done by an actual Freemason. And of course, as always, they use comedy to deflect on just how real everything Joe Rogan is saying in this clip from News Radio. If you haven't seen this before, this is a good one. Take a look.
That all federal, state, and local judges are members of a certain obscure sect of the Freemasons.
Now, hold on. Our strategy is that all judges are Masons?
There's more to it than that.
Like what?
Well, there's a secret Masonic word which, when uttered, obligates judges to rule in your favor. And they have to go paddle each other off in a secret cave somewhere. It's a jam. Come on, Joe, give it up. Tubal Cain. Tubal Cain? Sorry, Tubal Cain? What the hell does that mean? I have no idea. The master builder awaits the pyramids.
I beg your pardon?
I bet you do.
Do you have anything to say in your defense?
Tubal Cain?
I hereby find in favor of the guy with the adjourned.
Right, so again, this is one of their, this is their MO. Use humor, talk about this as if it's not true, but everything you saw is true, right? Let the judges are all Masons, we know that. The judges are all part of the synagogue of Satan, we know that. They have full control of the court systems, okay? A lot of the Jewish teachings, their books specifically say that a goyim will never win a case ever in a courtroom against a Jew. A Gentile will never be allowed to win, no matter how atrocious the crime is. It'll always be rewarded to the Jew over the Gentile, right? Well, the Freemasons, it's to say the Freemasons run and control the courts, okay? You have to be a Freemason to be in the Supreme Court, to be any type of a judge. So that whole skit, that whole humor behind it was to make people at home, without realizing it subconsciously, they're being programmed into dismissing and laughing off what people like us say, right? About Freemasons, about how they control the courts, how they have secret code words, which Tubal Cain isn't a secret code word. In fact, Tubal Cain is mentioned in the Bible, but it is a significant word in Freemasonry, which is associated with the Master Mason degree. And in the Bible, Tubal Cain is in the book of Genesis. He's a descendant of Cain, and Freemasons worship the ground that he walks on because Cain is a Canaanite. And again, remember, Freemasonry is linked directly with the synagogue of Satan, okay? The Talmud and the Kabbalah, these secret books, these secret Jewish teachings all teach the same thing that Freemasonry does in regards to black magic and sorcery and mysticism. So that clip that you saw is a perfect example of who Joe Rogan is, right? He was used at the time to make light of Freemasonry, their control over the world. They use humor. The majority of the audience in 1995 doesn't have the slightest clue what Joe Rogan's talking about, but they're being programmed into laughing it off and dismissing it. What? A secret word? And automatically some court case gets dismissed because they say the name of Tubal Cain. And Freemasonry has a lot of secret words, which aren't so secret anymore because of the internet. But I'm sure if you try to use some of their secret words to get out of maybe getting pulled over for a ticket or in a courtroom, you probably get arrested because, as I've covered in the past, there's actually laws to protect Freemasons. There's laws in place that say that regular people cannot impersonate Freemasons. So it shows you how much power they actually have. So I wanted to cover that. Thanks again to Nicole for sharing it. We're going to see these clowns start to push this type of stuff. You notice that they don't talk about AI governance. You notice that they don't talk about the stuff the UN talks about. When it comes to climate change, they call them a climate cult. Why do they do that? They do that because they want you to think that these people are all just crazy environmentalists who are a little too obsessed with the climate. Then they say, well, climate change is real, but these people are taking it too far. You ever hear any of these guys talk about weather modification? How they have the ability to control and manipulate the weather, geoengineering, any of it? Bringing up HARP, bringing up even the Aurora Borealis when that was going on, how there were simulations in the sky. No, you do not. You do not hear them. They go along with the climate hoax, but they say they're just climate, they're climate crazies, right? They're just a cult of climate people who are obsessed with the environment, and then they dismiss it. When it comes to other topics like weather modification, it doesn't get discussed. And now we're hearing about universal basic income being a good thing and how AI is coming and we can't stop it. Why can't we stop it? Who are these people to tell us that we have to have AI? You know how you stop it? You get off your tech. And you say, well, you could have your own banking system. You could have all your crap through technology, and the people who stay on their tech can go through it. But if 50% of the population suddenly stop using their tech and say, well, we'll just start our own currency and we'll start our own off-grid communities. Well, we know what they'll probably end up doing anyway, right? Which would turn into another Waco. which would be, well, all these people have decided that they don't want to be a part of our society and join our digital currency and have a digital ID because they're extremists and they're all trying to live off land and they're all armed and they're all going to bomb buildings. You know, that's what they would say. And then all the sheep will go, well, let's get rid of them. They're a dangerous threat to all of us, because all they would have to do is create one false flag and one psyop. Those people believe it. And then they'd run over us with the tank and those people would cheer for it because they're just completely brain dead sheeple. So Joe Rogan pushing universal basic income. What a surprise, right? Another agent. And I thought you'd get a kick out of the clip from News Radio. I thank everybody who is here. I appreciate all of you greatly. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families, as always.